Mr. Simon, over to you.
Yes, sir, and good morning, Mr. Maxwell.
Morning.
Right, sir, Mr. Maxwell has got obviously a proof of evidence, main proof of evidence, no rebuttal. It's got some tendencies to it, but principally the main proof itself is probably the only thing you're going to need. No doubt helpful to have out maybe not that we even need the plan, probably not. I think you've seen most of the documents already today that you need to see. Right, Mr. Maxwell, you tell us in your main proof in section 1 on page 1 that you're David Maxwell, you're a chartered member of the RTPI, set out some of your academic qualifications. You tell us that you practiced as a planner for over 23 years. Indeed, you've been a director at WSP, where you are at the moment, since January of 2015. You've got particular experience in Essex, in and around Essex, including securing planning permissions for different things in and around Essex. And you've been involved in this site since, is it March 2022? You said?
No, that's correct. Yeah.
Is all of that correct?
Yes.
Could you give us the extent of your familiarity with the site and indeed with the area in which the site sits, so the inspector understands your sort of part in this?
Yes, so I'm very familiar with the site. I have visited the site on several occasions. I'm also extremely familiar with Billericay and this part of Essex.
Why is that?
I grew up in Billericay actually, and I currently live in Chelmsford.
Broadly speaking, so far as the context for this appeal, the inspector said all sorts of stuff about an old planning, housing numbers and all the rest of it. What do you consider to be the sort of the key features that, if you like, lay the table for the planning analysis?
I think the most significant issues really are the very significant housing land supply shortfall. That there is only at best a 1.85 year housing land supply, and also the very persistent ongoing housing delivery shortfalls, including the most recent assessment of there being only 41% housing delivery within the borough, and that the borough is scoring it's the 7th worst in terms of housing delivery across the country. I also think the significant needs and the lack of supply of care accommodation within Basildon districts, as evidenced by Ireland tenants, is extremely important, and it's a really critical issue for this appeal. I also think that the lack of an up-to-date local plan is preventing the authority from addressing these really quite serious shortfalls.
Well, it sounds like the council are agreeing with you on that, really. If we start briefly following the sort of section 38(6) structure with the statutory development plan, with the inspector's seen lots of it today, not all of it, but lots of it. We don't need to turn it up, but just could you give the inspector just headline form your assessment of which bits are important and what to take away from it?
Yes, so the Basildon plan, the adopted plan, was in 1998. Some of the policies contained in the plan that were consistent with national policy were saved in 2007. At the time, the local plan policies being saved, they were consistent with set out in national PPGs at the time, the planning policy statements and government circulars. The key components of the saved plan are the proposals map, which does confirm the appeal site as being within the green belt. The 1998 local plan did review and define the green belt at the time, with the development needs only up to 2001 in mind. The proposed development, the appeal proposal, does not conflict with state policy GB1, which simply defines the area of green belt.
And again, that was something that we've been over and agreed today.
Yes.
What about the other policies?
In terms of other safe policies, the proposed development subject to the appeal is in accordance with the development plan policy, including policy S5, affordable housing, BE12, development control. Those, yes, the appeal proposal accords with those saved policies from the local in 2007.
Thank you very much. Just one question before we move off the development plan and on to other matters. Just trying to policy S5, which is one you just mentioned on affordable. I won't ask to turn it up, but what that does is to set a suggested range of affordable housing provision, which is in a range of between 15 to 30%. That's the development plan range.
Yes.
So you said we accord with that policy. Could you just give the inspector a flavour in terms of what's actually proposed here in terms of overall quantum of affordable? How do we do versus the development plan range of 15 to 30%?
So the appeal proposal exceeds that range. It provides for 31%, 47 affordable units. So it goes above and beyond the development plan policy, and it provides the affordable is 70% rented and 30% shared ownership.
Right, that's the existing development plan. Can I ask you about this withdrawn development plan? Now, as we've said already, there's the plan itself, which is obviously gone and not coming back. There's the evidence base that sat behind that plan, and we've already over this inquiry spent a bit of time looking at some bits of that evidence base in respect of landscape, green belt and other things. What's your assessment of the withdrawn local plan and its relevance, if you like, to the inspector's exercise?
Well, the relevance, there is considerable relevance, particularly with the evidence base that backed up the withdrawn local plan. So there were several documents produced with the local plan, the Greenbelt Review, the HELA, the landscape character and greenbelts, landscape capacity study, and the landscape appraisal and the sustainability appraisal. I'd say the key documents which the council produced, submitted to the local plan examination, and which supported the proposed release and allocation of the sites in the draft local plan, actually for up to 255 dwellings, considerably more than the number that's proposed through the appeal. So the appeal proposal was worked up in very carefully to look at the site constraints and to look at retention of the landscaping and the important features of the site, including the pond, site boundary, and taking into account those constraints. The design team felt it appropriate that's a scheme for up to 150 dwellings, plus the care scheme would be an appropriate scale of development to the site.
We've seen, as I say, reference to lots of bits of the evidence base, the Greenbelt Review, there's the HELA, which is before us, landscape studies and all the rest of it, sustainability appraisal. If I ask you about weighting, just so that the council, I think, has confirmed its understanding that the approach that was taken by Inspector Dillon and indeed also by Inspector Masters and indeed by Inspector Woodwards in the 3 recent appeal decisions is correct, which is to say that the plan itself, no weight, the evidence base supporting said plan, considerable weight in favour of the scheme. That's the council's position. What's your take on the correct approach to attributing weight to these different features?
Well, I consider that considerable weight should be given to those local plan evidence-based documents that supported release of and allocation of the appeal sites, and that the evidence weighs heavily in favour of the sites as a suitable development site for residential and the care scheme. Right.
Could I ask you to turn on then to the overall analysis of benefits and harms? Now, if we start with the harms side of the planning scales, if you like, we know, of course, that Mr. Hughes, from the round table, identifies impacts on greenbelt openness and on greenbelt purposes. You were here for all of that. You obviously read his brief.
Yes.
And we know also that that 148 of the framework requires us to give substantial weight to any harm to the green belt.
Yes.
And so what's your approach then in light of all of that? To green, any harm that the inspector finds to the green belt in terms of giving it weight?
Well, at table 1 of my group of evidence, I have summarised the weighting that I consider ought to be attributed to those harms. So in terms of impacting the purpose of the green belt, yes, I consider that would be substantial. Although the impact would be limited and it would be localised effects only. And then in terms of impact on the openness of the green belts, again, I agree with the authority that the weighting should be substantial, but that relates to site-wide harm, and there is no harm to the spatial or perceived visualising of the wider green belt.
Okay. So far as any other harms that to which you attribute weight, what else is there?
Well, the landscape and visual effects, which again have been assessed by Mr. Hughes, I would consider moderate weight should be given to those effects. The landscape effects being moderate to major adverse effects at the site-wide scale, and the visual effects being moderate adverse visual effects to some properties locally on Potash Road, as well as Foxhill House to the east of the site. I go on in table 1 to confirm other minor adverse visual effects for residents on the Vale and the use of the Wayland Conference Centre. Neutral effects along Potash Road, and the other visual effects are negligible.
All right. So that's all. We've done the harms side of the scales. Let's think about the benefits side of the scales. Now we've done the numbers, I think, to death now with a number of different witnesses. So we can afford, I think, probably to take it all at a bit more of a clip, perhaps. In terms of the approach to be given to market housing, it doesn't sound like there's an enormous amount between you and the council, the sellers for the council. Could you just explain where you're at and why?
Well, certainly, but the weighting in terms of the benefit of the 103 new market homes is very substantial. We have heard the evidence in terms of housing land supply and the lack of delivery, and that these 103 homes will go considerably towards addressing the shortfalls.
Affordable then. What approach do you take to affordable housing in the way that should be attributed in the balance?
Well, similarly, I consider that the weighting should be very substantial. The affordable housing delivery within Basildon's had been extremely low, exceptionally low, and the supply is similarly, well, very poor, and therefore the delivery of the 47 affordable homes should, in my opinion, be given very substantial weights. Now,
I think so far, as I say, broad measure of agreement with the council. Turning on to care beds, less agreement. Could you just first set out what your approach is to care beds, and then I'll ask you a question, if you like, on what you'd say if Miss Richardson was correct for the council. But first, your positive case. What do you say the inspector should find in respect of care beds?
Well, the evidence from Ivan tenants has demonstrated a considerable shortfall of 1,845 care bed spaces within Basildon by 2043. Now, I consider the need for care accommodation is a critical need, and therefore the delivery of a 50-bedroom care scheme at this site should be attributed very substantial weight.
Right, that's your case. Now, as we heard yesterday, and the inspector's got lots of details, so I'm not going to go over the detail, just to summarise what I'm talking about. There's this debate about whether or not we use the 2011 prevalence rate for care needs or the shop at derived prevalence rates. That's the debate that the inspector's going to need to reach a view on. And we've seen what other inspectors thought about it, but our inspector's going to need to reach his own view. Now, if our inspector goes along with, if you like, the approach from that Shrewsbury decision, he's with Mr. Tennant, you've set out your view. If he decides that the 2011 prevalence rate should be preferred, he goes along with the council's position. If he's also with the council on the topic of supply, then there was a debate about that, whether you should ignore net provision or not, and he said about all of that. So he ends up just with the council on all of it, and he therefore decides that there's no pressing need for more care beds. In that world, what does it do to your planning assessment?
Well, the requirement for care accommodation remains a very critical issue. There is a critical need within Basildon. The weighting in that scenario in the council's position would inevitably reduce to some extent, and rather than, in my opinion, being very substantial, I think I would place it as requiring or being attributed substantial weight.
If Ms Richardson were right in full across the board on all of it, as far as needs care aid is concerned, it affects the weight that you give it. It diminishes the weight that you give to the benefit of delivering care beds through this scheme. But does it diminish it to an extent that would change the ultimate planning balance in this case?
No, most certainly not. I consider the number and the weighting of the benefits are clearly outweighing the harms.
Let me ask you about something else, the economic benefits associated with the scheme. I've heard a little bit from the council through Ms Ellis about some of those economic benefits today. Sounds what she said. She was, I think, in the end stuck with, oh my goodness, in the end stuck with limited weight to be associated with them, even though, as she acknowledged, there'd be a whole range of jobs for people in the area, including permanent jobs and construction jobs, permanent jobs through the delivery of the care, and etc. etc. But she's at limited weight for whatever reason. What's your assessment of the appropriate weight to be attributed to the scheme's economic benefits, and why?
Well, the economic benefits are, well, there are several benefits, and I certainly consider they should be given significant weight. There's a temporary, approximate 3-year time period for delivery, the implementation of the scheme, providing over 120, about 122 temporary construction jobs per year over that 3-year period. And then in addition, the operational use of the sites in the longer term, which would provide 64 permanent jobs for residents living within Basildon district. There would be a £28 million increase to gross value added to the local economy over a 10-year period, and savings in the region of £1.4 million to the local authority. I consider that these benefits are considerable, and significant weight should be attributed to them, in my view.
Can we turn on to ecology? We've obviously heard a lot about ecology, about dormice, about biodiversity net gain and all of that. And in fact, going into the beginning of the inquiry, ecology was one of the two things that the council thought stood against the scheme succeeding overall. It was ecology and care needs. Things have moved on a bit since then. What's your assessment of where we stand in terms of benefits or weight to be attributed to ecology in the balance?
In my opinion, the ability to demonstrate that biodiversity net gain of 16.9% confirmed through Joseph Saunders' evidence is very important to the appeal scheme. Goes above and beyond any policy requirements that the scheme must comply with. 17% represents a significant benefit. The mixture of proposals from the ecology solutions include back boxes, hibernation tubes. The council's ecologists have confirmed that there would be a licensable scheme and it would maintain a favourable conservation status of dormouse. Badger sets would be maintained. There would be common lizard and hedgehog habitat safeguarding, new nesting bird opportunities, including swift boxes in the fabric of the building, and retention, importantly, of significant areas of landscaping as confirmed through the landscape parameter plan. So, yes, in summary, I consider the BNG offer and ability to provide those measures represents a significant benefit at 17% net gain.
Next, areas of open space. That was something that was commented on by the council in the planning evidence. Just now, obviously, the inspector had a look just this morning at the illustrative master plan. What weight do you attribute to the open space provision on this as part of this scheme, and why?
Well, the illustrative master plan has demonstrated that the site will be opened up to the public. It's currently not accessible to the public. There will be walkways, there will be woodland areas, there will be play spaces, there will be equipped play areas, which will be accessible not only to the residents of the proposed development, but also to local residents living in the locality to access and be able to use and benefit from those facilities. So I consider that moderate weight should be given to those notable benefits.
Finally on the list, I'd like to ask you about the improvements in relation to public transport, bus services and the like, and connectivity. How does that weigh in your assessment?
I think in a similar vein to the accessibility to open space, the benefits to the public transport improvements will be realised by local residents as well as the residents within the new development. The ability to access improved local bus services and the ability to use enhanced bus facility is a real benefit and should, in my opinion, be accorded or attributed moderate weight.
All right. Now, take a step back. Overall balance time. Overall balance. We know what the council's case is. The council's case is, as I understand it, that the benefits do not clearly outweigh harms, but that they would do if the ecology issues were resolved, which in large part they either have been or can be, and if this is correct on care needs, then the council's view would be that the appeal should be allowed. What is your view on how the ultimate 148 balance should be struck?
I consider that the appeal should be allowed based on the weighting that should be attributed to each of those benefits that we've just considered: the market homes, the affordable homes, the care accommodation, economic benefits, biodiversity net gain, accessibility to open space, and public transport improvements.
Thank you very much indeed. So those are the questions in chief.
Okay, I have possibly Mr. Taylor, you may have some questions to pose to Mr. Maxwell.
Yes, thank you,
I
John.
might have some questions following that. And then
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, are you aware of the article in The Guardian yesterday headed "Michael Gove to ease house building targets for councils in England"? And just to help you, Gove is also expected to allow authorities to allocate less land to future development. Local officials can argue that more development would damage the character of an area or require building on greenbelt land. Further down it says, Gove agreed to do so, publishing proposed changes to the national planning policy framework that would allow local authorities to treat the formula for setting housing targets as advisory rather than binding. Under the changes, councils would be able to set far lower 5-year plans than suggested by the population-based formula if they can show that meeting it would change the character of an area. Since then, about 60 local authorities have withdrawn. I mention that because we're criticised continually for having withdrawn the local plan, but apparently Basildon is among 60 that have withdrawn or delayed the publication of their housing plans as they wait for the new rules to be published. Your reaction to that, please.
Well, in response, the needs and the delivery of housing within Basildon is, well, there's a severe need, and the delivery has been exceptionally poor. These are real social issues for residents within Basildon and indeed the wider South Essex area, for people who require homes and need homes, in particular affordable homes. And that requirement is pressing and real and here now and likely to be here for several years until at least Basildon Basildon Council does produce and adopt a new local plan, which, as we've heard over the last few days, will be not until at least 2027. So in the meantime, there is a real, very strong need to deliver soon new homes across Basildon districts, including Billericay. Delivery of housing in Billericay has been exceptionally low. The need and requirements is considerable. You only need to look at the proposals map that the council attached to their withdrawn plan to see the extent of land that the council itself recognised needs to be released in order to meet the housing need across the borough. So I think that need it's not going to go. It's not going to disappear until the plan is produced and sites are brought forward.
Thank you for that. On transport, which we've just touched on, I've asked more than once for any document pertaining to the rail infrastructure. I realise that it's outside the ambit of the local council. Have you seen any such document, and who is the provider of this document? And is the inspector likely to be aware of it? In other words, is it in the 3 categories of documents which we've been provided with?
I think firstly, I just have to note that the concern about lack of space on the trains is not something I've experienced myself. I use the line from Liverpool Street to Chelmsford and on occasion also to Billericay, including during rush hours. And I don't recognise, I haven't observed the lack of space on those trains as being a major issue currently. I recognise there may be limits to providing more additional trains through both Chelmsford and Billericay, but I don't consider that to be doesn't prevent people from travelling to London. It's not the experience I had myself.
Well, but you have to look, as it were, on behalf of. You have to show that the rail infrastructure is adequate, and but I think there's evidence that it is not from Billericay station or indeed from Ingatestone station. For example, have you noted the relocation of the HMRC offices from Southend to Stratford, leading to another body of people then commuting to Stratford, so that trains arrive at Billericay station full. And on the other line, have you not considered the effect of the Bewley estate? Perhaps you've heard that they're asking for their own station. And this, of course, is, as it were, upstream of Ingatestone station, which means the trains arrive absolutely full, and therefore the disabled, the elderly, and the pregnant get no seats.
I do recognise the trains are in peak times busy, but I've not noticed them being to the extent that people cannot use the trains and cannot travel.
Well, I've seen documentation which suggests there's standing room only, and this is rated over.
On occasion, I agree. On occasion, there is standing room only. I do agree with that. Yes.
Thank you. Right. On a larger point, are you acquainted with the limits to growth? This was published in 1972.
Yeah.
It was judged sufficiently important for Tony Blair to establish an office in his cabinet called the Performance and Information Unit. I suggest, put it to you, that this applies at every scale, every community. For example, the ridiculous extreme, if you backed everybody standing on 1 square meter, we'd fall off the edges of the land. Yes, you accept the principle. Right.
The principle of the limited growth,
Yes.
well, to some extent, but I certainly do not believe that Billericay reached limits to growth. In fact, I consider quite the opposite, that there are considerable opportunities, not just the appeal site, but other sites around Billericay that could quite appropriately come forward to deliver new homes in a sustainable manner.
Well, would you address the possibility that Billericay needs not jobs but homes to improve the imbalance between the homes and the transport limits?
But you meant that the other way around.
Yeah.
Jobs, not home. More.
Well, I think when new homes come forward, it's important that there are employment opportunities for new residents of any new housing scheme. This particular scheme, I have provided evidence that the scheme would generate its own employment opportunities, both through the construction phase of over 120 jobs over a 3-year period, and also over 60 jobs locally through the operational phase of the development as well. So yes, I agree, it's helpful, beneficial to have employment opportunities, and there are employment opportunities within Billericay, within local towns, within Basildon, and equally the sites is suited to those who may commute to London or indeed to other towns or villages that are along the railway route.
Well, I invite you to address the question of the number of homes being far in excess of the number of jobs. Therefore, the proposed scheme aggravates the present imbalance of homes to the transport limits.
I think this particular appeal scheme would lend itself quite well for people to be able to work from home to some extent, or maybe to have a hybrid way of working, perhaps to be working 2 or 3 days a week from the site within homes, and then perhaps either also work locally in an office in Chelmsford or Basildon or Billericay, or perhaps indeed to commute to the city into London. So I think think the appeal scheme could lend itself to that type of arrangement.
I find interesting your use of the word could. It's occurred to me several times during this morning's discussion that we were discussing a hypothetical, that is to say, with mitigations, this, that, or the other, it could, but why should we address hypotheticals? I wish one final point. The inspector asked the previous witness, do you see scope for more suitable sites than the present sites? And as I heard it, Ms. Ellis said yes. I invite you to comment.
Well, we have heard evidence this morning that there will be scope for some land to come forward, brownfield land to deliver housing. Some of those sites may be very suitable or highly suitable. Some of those may be constrained and not come forward or for different reasons. But in my opinion, there is an absolute need to release land from the green belts in order to even come close to meeting both market and affordable housing requirements. And the appeal site represents an excellent site to do so, to deliver new homes to Billericay, which are much needed, and it represents a logical and a sustainable site to do so.
I put it to you that it doesn't have to be this site in Billericay.
I think this site scores very highly in terms of its suitability. It's a sustainable location, access to schools, access to shops, access to the town centre, access to the railway station, very good public transport facilities, access to leisure facilities. So I think, and it's common ground with the county council that it does represent a sustainable location to deliver market and affordable homes.
Then I must ask you, did you hear the evidence we had from the lady who spoke on behalf of Steer? She acknowledged that even at present, the cross flow, that is to say, across the Stock Road from Potash Road, the road in question, impeded the flow, the major flow up and down the Stock Road. And we're talking, of course, predominantly at peak hours. Now, there are two particular stages of traffic arising. The one is the construction phase. I've sought to get a handle on this. Anyhow, my rough number is with the construction duration of 3 years, we're looking at something like 3,000 trucks a year, and it was, anyhow, it comes down to something like 30 a day. Anyhow, but we're not provided by you with either the weight of construction or the total amount in truckloads of construction materials, although from your evidence, I now know the duration of the program. On the matter of public transport, I invite you to consider how the construction flows and the post-construction, the fully developed flows, by adding to this cross flow across Potash Road, it's only compounding what is, I put it to you, what is already a very poor situation. And adding bus services mean bus services would stand in the queue. We heard from Brookside, the mitigation proposal. So please address how additional traffic can be perceived as a benefit from this site. And then I'll come back on the sustainable transport.
Well, I think first and foremost, just wish to stress that the impacts of the development in terms of the highway impacts has been assessed very thoroughly by Steer, highway consultants. They agreed with the scope of their assessment of those impacts with the county council prior to submitting the application.
Yes.
That information went in with the application.
Yes.
County Highways assessed the application, including that
Yes.
transport assessment work, and have accepted the conclusions and the mitigation measures as proposed by Steer, and that is all accepted and agreed and confirmed in a statement of common ground with Essex Highways. In terms of public transport improvements that would arise through the legal agreements, I consider that moderate weight should be given to those as benefits to the local residents and existing, and clearly would be provided for those new residents within the development. That would give additional ability for existing residents to access town and services within Billericay and to make onward journey perhaps by train, for example.
Well, sadly, I cannot concur. The bus I was waiting for from the Vale never arrived, and I had to make other arrangements this very day to get here in the morning. So they're just as care homes can lack staff, so it seems bus services can lack drivers. But now on the your suggestion that sustainable transport options are available. I speak as a cyclist resident in the Vale, and I am sufficiently confident on my bicycle to cycle to Basildon, but I would not wish this on any marginal case. They would be taking the life into their own hands. This is an example of the limits to growth. The limits to growth for sustainable transport, for example, a cycleway all the way to the shops, were set perhaps in the 15th century when they decided on the width of the road from Stock to Billericay. We need to note this. If you are proposing such...
Could this be a question, Lachlan?
Yes. Then how can you satisfy the requirement for sustainable transport from the proposed site to Billericay shops?
Well, the appeal scheme has been designed to ensure the ability for residents to access from the development by footpath or cycling as existing residents locally on Potash Road or indeed from the Vale would be able to access the shops at close to Mayflower School, the local shops there, for example, or to travel to Queen's Park shops, the range of facilities that are available quite readily for anyone walking or cycling from the appeal sites, as well as travel along the Stock Road to access the farm shop, for example, which I believe would be the nearest shop to purchase everyday goods such as bread and milk, for example. But those facilities are all within quite reasonable, easy walking distance of the appeal site. And there are contributions being made through the legal agreement to ensure enhancements to the bus services that would allow for journeys to be made using the number 300, for example, which would be a very short walk to get down to the 300 to access Billericay or to access Stock or onwards to Chelmsford or indeed further afield. So I think the ability to access shops, facilities, leisure facilities from the appeal sites is really quite excellent, and the contributions being made will only enhance and improve that access.
Very well. You mentioned in listing economic benefits, 1.4 million pounds of benefit to the local authority. Would you say what this is, how it arises, please?
Well, it would primarily be through the delivery of the care facility, removing or reducing, I should say, the need for the authority to assist with, for example, trips and falls, and for care to be provided through self-funders within the care scheme, effectively.
Well, I take that to be a transfer of funds from elderly people. They're already paying local rates. I wonder why they should further subsidise the local authority on this issue. But thank you for that information.
Okay, I realise I took things out of order slightly and should have asked Mr. Atkinson to cross-examine, but I don't think it matters too much. It might have given you food for thought in your questioning, but over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Maxwell. Good afternoon. The advantage of coming last is pretty much the issues of focus. So I really just want to ask you a few questions about the attribution of weight to the various benefits, insofar as there are differences. And dealing first with market and affordable housing, is it fair to say that essentially you and Miss Ellis are saying the same thing? It's, you say very substantial, she says substantial. Miss Ellis's view is that they are much the same thing. They're the sort of highest level of harm. Is that a reasonable way of proceeding?
Well, I certainly see delivery of market and affordable homes, as well as the care accommodation, that is being at the very highest.
Yeah. And the
rate of benefits.
I mean, you will know that often there's in inquiries of this sort, there's sometimes inspectors find substantial weight, sometimes they find very, but it'd be reasonable to say that they're the top level really, and there's not much distinction between them.
Well, I certainly consider those three, the market, the affordable homes and the care accommodations, being at the top, at the very top.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I just wanted to deal with the care home separately, actually. Where we've got to is again, you suggest the very top level of weight, and Miss Alice says, well, limited weight, although she accepted that if the inspector finds for Mr. Tennant, or rather prefers his evidence, then Ms. Ellis would upgrade her weight to the highest level, she said, significant. If the reverse were true, and you touched on this in your chief, if the inspector finds in favour of the evidence of Miss Richardson, would you accept that as a discrete aspect of the housing case, that would then reduce the amount of weight that could be placed on the provision of the care homes?
I accept it. It could be reduced to an extent, perhaps reducing from very substantial to substantial. But it's, you know, it's a critical requirement, it's a critical need to deliver care accommodation.
Yeah, but obviously if the inspector agreed with Ms. Richardson, I don't want to get into that debate again with you, but if he agreed with Ms. Richardson, he would be accepting that the need was being met and into the next 5 years, certainly.
Well, I agree that weighting would reduce to an extent, yes.
But you wouldn't go as far as to what Ms. Ellis says, limited weight.
No, I would not, no.
You'd stick with significant.
Well, I'd downgrade from very substantial to substantial.
And a further question on that, if that were the case, no, forget that. It's okay. Thank you. In terms of the economic benefits, you say significant, Ms. Ellis says limited, and essentially the gist of what Ms. Ellis says is that, well, it's largely relocated expenditure of households from within the local area who would be occupying new houses. And on that basis, it is reasonable, isn't it, to attribute only limited weight to these economic benefits?
No, I'll certainly consider that the benefits would be significant, and I'm not sure I agree that it would just be relocating financial spend within borough. We have no way of knowing where the new residents would be coming from. There may well be a number, quite likely a fairly high number from within Basildon district, but equally there may be some coming from outward from the borough as well. But the economic benefits are varied and include the temporary jobs, considerable temporary jobs for the 3-year period, over 120 per annum, and then 64 permanent jobs in the longer term through the operational phase as well as the £28 million increase to gross value added.
I mean, there is, in terms of the, I understand what you're saying, in terms of the provenance of the future residents, we don't know that, but there is a kind of tension, isn't there, between, on the one hand, the vigour with which you pursue the shortage of provision across Basildon for the borough as a whole, and yet on the other hand you're saying, oh yes, but we don't know where those people are coming from, so we can place more weight on the economic benefit. Do you understand the tension there?
There is considerable pressure for new housing within Basildon Borough. There is no doubt about this, and I'm absolutely sure people are unable to find homes within Basildon district and move out of the borough because of that lack of availability of homes.
Yeah.
But equally, there's a pressing housing need across the whole of South Essex. So it's not just a borough; it's a South Essex and indeed it's a wider issue.
Right. Finally, then on the mice, and again, without wishing to rehearse what we heard from yesterday from Mr. Harvey and Mr. Saunders. Broadly, if the inspector finds in favour of Mr. Harvey's evidence, and by that I mean, if he finds that there is not enough information at present available to him to pass the not unlikely to be licensed test, how would that be dealt with in your judgments in terms of weight?
I think it's important firstly to recognise Mr. Harvey, I believe he confirmed that a licensable scheme would be
In due course, that's why I asked.
at the appropriate time.
Yeah,
And
in due
reserve
course.
matters opportunity. So
That's why I asked about, as we are at the moment.
well, the evidence that has been provided by Joseph Saunders confirms that, and he set out his position very clearly that he considers that.
No, I understand that.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to get you off, but I'm just, you know, in the situation where the inspector disagrees with Mr. Saunders, and I don't want to, let's say, go back into all that.
Okay.
If he finds, he said, you know what, Mr. Harvey's right about this.
Okay.
How would you advise the inspector to attribute weight on that basis?
Well, there would continue to be significant benefits from the appeal scheme in terms of biodiversity net gain.
Yeah, but focusing on the mice. Bearing in mind that the reason for refusal was about the mitigation specifically for those.
Well, I think the critical issue is that the licensable scheme will be achievable, and this is not the appropriate time to be determining for that.
So you can't attribute weight at this stage, is that what you're saying? You're saying ultimately something may be approved, and that will be
The mitigation proposed by Joseph Saunders from Ecology Solutions is appropriate. He set out.
Yeah, I know, but
I
assuming it's
consider that.
Yeah.
Even if it weren't, the Council of Ecologists has accepted that there will be a licensable scheme. For the site.
It might not be the same precisely. Might not be precise in the same scheme.
It will potentially be different because the reserve matters will potentially be different from the illustrated layout. So it's likely that the final mitigation scheme will be to some extent different than that set out.
You know, I know that it is a difficult exercise to attribute weight, but I'm just wondering if you're able to do it. Mindful of what you say, assuming Mr. Harvey is correct, but also on the basis of what he said about, well, in due course, there will be a license, there could be a licensable scheme, reserved my state, but as you accept, that may be different. How is the inspector to deal with that conundrum, if you like, which arises from
Well, I think
being an outline?
I think the important issue there would be that the appellant's ecologist has set out a mitigation scheme that he is confirmed and is set out in quite some detail, considered would be appropriate and would be licensable and would maintain a very favourable conservation status.
Well, I know.
But secondly, the council's own ecologist has likewise agreed that there will be a licensable scheme for this site, which will be worked through in reserve matters.
Yeah. Which may be slightly or
Which could be a bit different from the ecology solutions scheme, which is inevitably based on an outline scheme with parameter plans.
If the answer is you don't feel able to attribute weight given where we are, then that's fair enough. Is that what you're saying?
That is the case, yes.
Thank you very much.
Nothing from me. Is there
Nothing
anything
more
else?
from you. Okay, so that completes the formal
It
evidence.
does, yes. It does.
So we can think about a lunch break, but also I think we've got time now for site visit this afternoon.
Yes, and actually, does it almost seem to be brightening up, maybe? Can't quite see. Sunshine, take it while you can get it, sir, I would.
Mr. Taylor, you just,
Well, regarding the, I wasn't objecting,
no.
just the practicalities of getting us to site. I just say that.
It's going to be, the reason I need to be accompanied is because it's private land. Essentially, I will be making my own visual assessment of the site at the visit. The only reason I need people with me is, purely for access. And so it's accompanied in that sense. I don't really need any more than one member from the appellant and one member from the council.
Mayor,
Because I won't be hearing any evidence.
no,
So, that's all I need. So. if
well,
that's
may
so-
I accompany you, sir? Because I too can't get access without somebody opens the door.
Not really. I don't think that's necessary. I've heard the evidence.
I see.
I don't really want to be talking to people
No.
or hearing any more evidence. Anything like that. All I need is perhaps Mr. Hughes to select it. I've got plans in my car, but if you, Mr. Hughes, you.
I have high copies of the parameters.
Well, the parameters plan, I think, would be helpful.
Yeah.
Something that I'm pretty clear in my own mind where the important hedgerows for dormice are, just something to work
I have the
on.
parameters.
And I appreciate it's indicative, but I can look at the habitat we walk around. So, Mr. Taylor, are you content with that? It's going to be.
Yes, one last thing, I can make these available.
I I remember limits from growth from university,
Yeah.
and that's going back to me.
And when I said that, it's downloadable online, I
Yeah.
was simply meaning as a aid memoir that
I
a
think.
photocopy of that
I think it's helpful. I think that has moved on now to the whole agenda of sustainability. And
Yes,
sustainable
indeed.
development, which is very much embedded in the national planning policy framework.
Okay,
But nonetheless, I've heard all your comments and contributions for which I'm very grateful, and I thank you for that. I think we're now on the position that I've heard the evidence.
yes,
We're hearing a summary of that evidence on a virtual basis, which you can listen into, whereby Mr. Atkinson will summarise the council's position.
I see,
Likewise, with Mr. Simons,
yes,
and provide me written comments of that in advance, because inspectors find that a very helpful basis upon which to review the evidence and make their decisions.
Yes.
So any more needs to be said? Can I just move and sort of site visit?
Yeah.
So Mr. Hughes, you'll come along and
Yes.
join me, and from the council, it's Miss Ellis. And I need to, it means that I don't need another night in the hotel. So missing another night in Basildon, disappointing, but I can live
You
with
can
it.
live with it.
Yeah. So I need to go back to get my stuff.
Yes, of course.
but Mr. Chairman, I see roundtable discussion on conditions and S106.
Yes.
Yes.
I think the plan might be to do that on Tuesday.
The plan
morning.
is to do that on
Yes.
Tuesday.
Online.
Online, but that doesn't
Online.
include Mr. Taylor from joining in.
Oh, not at all. No, not at all. I'm hoping
I
to
see.
make the link available. To...
I've heard from what you've said, you're very computer literate, so
Well, indeed, yes,
you can, if you don't mind us all being faces on screens, you can join us for the discussion on the conditions. And I think I said earlier, that's a without prejudice discussion, because
yeah,
if the appeal is dismissed, then the conditions don't apply, but nonetheless, we need to go through them. But to help the council, we're still working on those conditions. We'll be talking about those on Tuesday, and that will be starting at
okay.
9:30. And Miss Ellis, the council's going to arrange the platform for that. Is it Teams?
I thought it was in, but I'll just.
Or whatever.
Yeah,
Whatever.
something, yeah.
Whatever system you
I'll
use.
speak with, no.
And if you can make sure Mr. Taylor's
Yes.
invited,
Yes.
all who need to be party to that.
Yeah.
Anything else I need to cover beyond talking about the side of it, the time and where we first meet? So I know the main access is through 41 when that is demolished. presumably.
Yeah, we commit next to 63, which is the gated access to the
What?
southeastern edge of the site.
I've
That's
six, yes, so that's that,
Yeah.
that's where I assume we might meet.
Yeah.
So I know where that
Which
is.
is just near room for three of us to put up there, I think.
Plenty of room at the front, because I didn't turn around there
Yeah, we can
actually.
open the gate as well.
Yeah. So what would be a sensible and convenient time?
12:40, yeah.
Depends on how long it takes you.
Oh, yeah, because I've got to go back and get bits and pieces.
Yeah, I mean, you've got time to have lunch.
2:30, something like that.
Let's say
It gets
two,
dark quite quick, doesn't it?
let's say 2 o'clock.
2:00.
That's doable, I think.
Yeah, we'll go.
So we'll meet outside 65, Mr. Hughes and Miss Ellis.
You are aware that the site's uneven, so you're very careful when you come around.
That's all right, I've got a stick. And Wellingtons, do I need Wellingtons?
Yeah,
More
yeah.
more than likely.
Yeah.
My hobby of bird watching, I tend to sort of come around sites like that quite frequently. So we say 2 o'clock. If anyone's late, obviously we won't start until the 2 people are there, but if we can aim for 2.
So just one very brief thing.
Yeah,
I want to mention, it was just to do with, says with some trepidation, I suspect what is becoming likely here. No, it wasn't that actually.
Oh, it wasn't.
Wasn't that. No, different sort of trepidation, absolutely, no, it was actually to do with, the framework which,
Yes,
the latest,
that's a very good
that
point.
trepidation. Not coming out today apparently, even though that's what had been promised. Apparently, this is all,
Yeah.
but anyway, apparently best bet is next week, potentially as late as the 22nd of December, which is a week tomorrow. Just before Christmas.
That has been slipped.
Are we-
by
It's
you.
it's slipped already.
It's
From
like
your
when we dealt
knowledge.
with, we dealt with a similar case when we were doing another big appeal,
Yeah.
central appeal. The NPF changed
Yes,
at the point at which we were dealing with, we inquiry shut,
Yeah.
closed. And I'm not asking, it's what the inspector had asked us to do was to review it and then.
do anything in
wanted-
right.
Yeah, wanted everything was.
I just wanted to raise, because I'd anticipated what we probably do, it looks like we're probably gonna close, probably, not necessarily, but probably before the new framework is issued.
Well, what would normally happen is I would give parties an opportunity to comment in the
Exactly.
light of the new framework.
That's what I'm,
We will get internal guidance on the sort of standard letter, but that's what normally.
Yeah, I just wanted to, exactly, so
I guess I'd
that,
invite interested parties.
absolutely, happy for everyone to, and maybe there'd be a sort of sequential exchange in the normal way whereby maybe the council and interested parties could go first, we'd be given some time to,
For last
the
word.
last word sort of
Yes.
thing. Not long, I mean, just a
With us in,
fine, a
Central-
few days or
Yeah.
whatever, just to review whatever's being said, so we can do some final.
So that's interesting. I mean, I thought it might come out tomorrow and then you.
I know, it would have been in some ways quite iffy if we could, it's a shame, so obviously we don't want it to delay your decision. But unless your decision was within 24 hours of closing, which it sets a little incentive for you, so. Yeah, well, we've got sealed 106s, so it's not completely impossible. But failing a very, very quick decision, we would potentially need this backwards and back and forth of the exchanges of written subs.
Yeah,
We can jump off that bridge when we get to it.
and we could even
Yeah.
talk about it on Tuesday.
Talk about it on Tuesday, absolutely, yeah, of course.
Okay, well, before I adjourn, thanks for all the contributions. Some of the topics very interesting, very
Yes.
interesting discussion and sort of discussion over the sort of the origins of the green belt. I can see my whole life, encapsulated.
That's how I feel, so. I learned a lot about dormice this week, that's for
Yes.
sure.
Great my planning career, because I started at Basildon when we did the first first local plan. So
You're
Yeah.
probably far too young for that.
So thank you all, Mr. Taylor, thank you, Mr. Atkinson. And so